Hey, it's Gabe with Vitev. Today we're going to install an RO system, show you how to do it. Now there's lots of different styles, there's lots of different brands, lots of different looks even. Some use generic filters, some use proprietary filters, some have a different tank setup, or maybe it's mounted into the system. There's lots of different looks and choices that you have. But at the end of the day, all ROs function the same way and all ROs install the same way. And so we're going to show you the installation steps that you need to put an RO system into your home, make it an enjoyable experience even, because sometimes plumbing can be a challenge. But if you know a few of these little tips, a few of these steps along the way, you can put that RO system in your home, no problem at all. You won't need a plumber. You can save yourself a lot of money, a lot of stress, a lot of heartache, and have some job satisfaction at the end of the day as well. So follow along here and we'll show you how it's done. All right, so the first thing to do before you even get started, before you even clean out the workspace and take everything off from underneath the sink, is to make sure you have the components you're supposed to have. If not, call the company, verify that what they've included is supposed to be in there, because sometimes the manuals don't get updated and the parts do. But just make sure you have the big things. Make sure you have a drain saddle. This is where your wastewater is going to flow out. And we'll go over these components down the road and show you how to connect them. But have the drain saddle, have a faucet connector to put on the bottom of your faucet to plug that tube in and make it really simple. Cold water supply line, that's a big deal. The flange and the gaskets and all the stuff for your faucet, a coil of tubes, probably some different sizes of tubes and different colors as well, because they'll be color coded at install. Just make sure you have what the install manual says you're supposed to have. The last thing you want to do is be in the middle of that installation and realize there's a component missing and now you're stuck. So take care of that first. When you verified it's all there, then you clean out underneath your sink, right? Just take everything out as much as you possibly can. You're going to need all the space you can get, trust me. And then what you need to do is look on the floor of the sink, or the counter underneath the sink, the cabinet underneath the sink, I should say. You may see some cutouts, some cracks, some crevices, some places where maybe some pipe is coming up from the basement or the crawl space or from outside of the home, whatever. Take time to fill those in, cover those up. Use some grocery bags, the plastic kinds you can kind of stuff in there. Use paper towels, some old rags, whatever you can find to cover those things up, because they will act like a magnet. If you're underneath there and you're connecting that faucet and you're kind of cramped and you're putting that last nut on and you drop it, where's it going to go? Right down that hole, never to be seen from again. Trust me. So take a little time, fill those up, cover those up, whatever, so that a little problem doesn't become a big problem down the road. All right, so you've got all the pieces and it's clean, or as clean as it can be underneath your sink now. You've got plenty of room to work. So now we're going to start with the installation, and we're going to start with the faucet, because that's what is going to require the most space or the most movement for you underneath the sink, and I'll show you why here. But before we get to that, there are basically three categories that you'll find yourself falling into. The first category is you already have a sink, just a standard metal sink like this, that has a cutout. You'll notice there may be a metal like cap or a lid here that you can just pop off with a screwdriver or a butter knife or something. You pop that off and voila, there you've got a big hole that's ready to go, and you can put a faucet in. That's what they're made for. You could be the other category 2, which is one that has a sprayer. You've got the old hose kind you pull out. You can wash your sinks out, just push the button and spray everything out. That's the other option. And you can take that sprayer out just by twisting the head. That sprayer head will come off the nozzle. You'll go underneath the sink and pull that tubing out, and then reconnect the head underneath your sink. Once you do that, you can then just hang it down there. You can tape it down there. You can put a little nail in the side and just hang it there. It's an easier way to get it out of the way than it is to disconnect it off the faucet and have to deal with that connection. So just disconnect, reconnect, and hang it out of the way. And I should have also said, turn off the supply line before you do that so that water doesn't come shooting out. But make sure your water is turned off at the main valve. Okay, and then the third category is one that needs a hole. If you have a metal sink like this, you can probably do it yourself. Most faucets are going to have a 1/2 inch stem on them. So if you have a 1/2 inch bit that you're going to use to drill through the stainless steel, then you'll be just fine. If you have granite or something else that you're a little bit more worried about, probably going to need to get a general contractor or a plumber to come out and bring a special tool, the special bit, and keep it wet. And it takes a little bit of time to make sure you get through that correctly and don't crack it. That's an expense it's worth paying for. Okay, we're going to start with, you've got the hole. Whatever category you find yourself in. The hole is there now, so let's start putting in the faucet. Faucets are all going to have some sort of metal flange that'll match the finish of the faucet, and then a rubber gasket as well. So you take your faucet from this end up here. We'll do this whole thing from the countertop so you can see easier. But the first thing that goes on is the metal flange, and then that rubber gasket, which is just meant to protect the faucet or the countertop from the faucet so it doesn't get scratched. Okay, that's going to go on first. That's all you're going to do from the top side, and that will sit just like that. Okay, might be easier to have somebody hold this for you, and you can move this and position it as you want, because every faucet's going to have a swivel head on it that'll make it go where you want it to go. So get the faucet set to where you want it, and then go down underneath the counter, and we're going to do the rest of the connections underneath there. So pretend we're underneath the counter now. Okay, so the next thing is you're going to have one of two styles. You can have just like a metal plate with some little bumps on it. This may be one fitting. The other option is more of a plastic fitting with a beveled edge on it, where one is a smaller diameter than the other. One side is, I should say. If you have a 1/2 inch hole, the smaller hole, then what you're going to do is put the flat edge up against the countertop. So you're going to be up from underneath like that. If you have the larger hole, then what you're going to use is the smaller diameter bevel, because that fits in that hole and gives a tighter seal. Okay, so just depending on what size of hole you have will determine which direction you push that on. This is a large hole, so if we're underneath the sink, we take that smaller diameter and push it up first, and that'll seat against the countertop just like that. Then you have a locking washer, goes on the stem next, and then the nut. And those are the pieces that'll fall down those cracks I mentioned. Okay, it's gonna go on really fast here. It'll take some time underneath as you continually twist it up that threaded neck there, the stem. Once those are good and tight, finger tight, and you got the faucet where you want it, use an adjustable wrench or just a normal wrench if you can, and tighten it down about another 1/4 to 1/2 turn so it's good and tight. And with some use, you may have to get back underneath there and kind of adjust it, after a couple of days, make sure you've got it where you want it. And then the last step will be your faucet connector. This goes on the same way as the nut. It's got a threaded end that goes right on the stem just like that. Then the other side is what we call a compression fitting. Could be a 1/4 inch, could be 3/8 inch, just depends on the tube that you have. But that makes it very, very simple to install the tubing that'll lead from your system to the faucet. And we'll talk about that when we set up the final connections. All right, so we're under the sink now. We're gonna do the feed line or the feed installation, or that's a cold water supply line, however you want to refer to it. And the way you're going to do that is using a John Guest angle stop valve. This is by far the most common connector or common fitting that you're going to find with an RO system, and it'll just splice in the line here on your cold water supply. You'll notice you'll have two braided lines. We only have one showing you right now, but one will be a cold line on the left and one will be a hot line on the right. They'll both have a supply valve here with some brass piping, coming out of your house or under your house or whatever. This is the main feed line for the kitchen. And the way you're going to do this is obviously turn off the connector, turn off the supply, and then you'll just twist off braided stainless line here. It may be difficult. You may need a wrench, an adjustable wrench or something to get that seal to break and to really start getting this loose and disconnected. And if you do have some hard water deposits or some scaling or lime, whatever, it might be a good idea to clean that off while you're at this point. So use a little vinegar. Vinegar is an acidic compound. It'll take off that alkaline buildup and get rid of it. If you don't have that, just use a little bit of a wire brush or an old toothbrush or something to get these threads clean, because you want to make a good tight seal here, obviously. So then when you have it apart, you're going to take your John Guest valve and put it in this connection here. You may want to use some threaded or some pipe threading tape, Teflon tape, plumber's tape. It's known by a lot of different things. You'll find this at Home Depot and Lowe's for like 75 cents a roll. Just rip off a little line, a little bit of it, and you'll put this on actually in the same direction, put it on the threads, the same direction that your connection will twist on as well. Just do 2 or 3, and then you'll start reconnecting this together. So the feed line, or the braided stainless, goes there. Now this new connection, which you'll put some Teflon tape on this connection as well, and then this will go on supply line. Probably should do this one first to make it a little bit easier on yourself. I'll just do it this way for now. But this is what you're going to end up with. So you have your main faucet line, works as normal, and then this will be your feed line for the RO system. Same sort of compression fitting like we have on the bottom of the faucet. You'll simply push the line in, most likely a 1/4 inch tubing. You'll push that tube in, push it again really hard, make sure it seats in there well, and it will not come out. And that's it. That's your feed line. Okay, so the last fitting we have to put in underneath the sink here is called the drain saddle. This is going to be the line where the wastewater from your RO system runs out and into your drain of your sink and out of the home. Typically, for every gallon or so of water that's made by an RO system, you're going to lose 2 to 3 gallons of water out of the house. That's how much wastewater it'll take to keep the membrane flushing, and that's the level of filtration that an RO membrane offers. Now, there's ways you can improve that. You can use like what we have with our systems. It's called a water optimizer. It's essentially a pump that allows the system to kind of be fooled and wastes about 4 times less water than your average RO system. But that's just something you can consider. If you haven't already got your RO, I would consider it now. If you have one, there's ways you can incorporate that too down the road. But for now, let me show you how to do the installation of the drain saddle. It looks like this. This one's extended out. It'll probably come, with the bolts tightened and stuff. But this is going to clamp on to one of 2 areas in your sink. Underneath the sink, you're going to have something that looks like this. It's called a P-trap, and it'll be mounted underneath your sink like that, right? This is to keep gases and odors and stuff from coming back in through the sewer lines or from your, your laterals or whatever, and into your home, because it's come back up and bubble up through the sink. So you'll probably have this on one sink or the other, not on both, but there'll be one drain line heading out of the house like this. If you have a double sink like what we have set up here, then what you'll have is another cross piece that connects the 2 tub basins, or the 2 sink tubs here. 2 sink basins, it's a better way to say it. So you'll have a line like this, maybe running over to your garbage disposal, or just to the other drain line on the other side of the sink. This is the best pipe to use to set up your waste line, just because it's the easiest one to get to, and it offers a quieter operation than this style does. If you only have one sink, and this is the setup that you're going to have, then you can put the drain saddle on here. It'll just mount up here. You're going to put it on the sink side of the P-trap. You're not going to put it on the back side of this, okay? Never do that. Always on the sink side of that drain setup. And you're always going to put it on there either horizontally or vertically. Most likely it's going to be horizontal, because you're not going to be able to put your drill up in a vertical set like that. So it'll be sitting something like this, okay? The closer you get to the trap, the louder or the quieter it may operate. If you have it up here and you have water that's trickling through that line, then you can maybe hear it running down your drain. So you may want to put it down a little bit closer to the actual bottom of the drain itself, okay? If you have this style, if you're going to be able to use a cross piece, then the way you do this is you're going to take the 1/2 of the drain saddle and put it on the pipe like that, okay? And then put a pencil in there, or something to get in there to make a mark on the pipe where you're going to drill a hole. It doesn't have to be a dark mark or anything like that, just something that you can see, and that's where you're going to center your drill bit. So do that, make a mark on the PVC pipe, all right, and then get your drill out. Depending on your waste line, it's going to have a different size of drill bit, so you're going to have to look at your manual for that. I'm not going to do the drilling right now in the video. We already have a hole pre-drilled. But once you get that drill and your hole punched through your PVC line, now what you want to do is take that side of the drain saddle and come up with a guide. Use a screwdriver, use a drill bit, the drill bit you use to drill the hole maybe, or something long enough that you can push it through and give yourself a nice guide and connection. See how that fits? That way you have a good tight seal, and you know exactly where this needs to line up, and you're not going to miss that hole. If you get the hole offset, it may not allow the tube to function correctly. Your wastewater may not go out. It may pool up in here. So you want to make sure you hit this thing right on the nose, and this guide will allow you to do that. It'll also let you take your hand off of it, and hold it a little bit easier. And now it's just a matter of, one other thing. You may have something that looks like this in the bag as well. It's a little pad. That pad actually sits. You see, this one's got it already installed, ready to go. But it just gives you a little bit better seal and a little bit better fit against the PVC, because it won't fit completely snug, so it kind of fills a little bit of that gap for you. It makes it a better, tighter seal. So if it's not on there, well, put that on there, like this. Use that to punch the hole out. It's got sticky double-sided tape, and that'll just sit in there really nice as well, okay? And now it's just a matter of putting the other side on. Where'd my hole go? All right, so now you put this side on. You hold that there, and you're provided 2 bolts that'll go through one side and out the other. The nuts on the other side will fit actually in or they're seated inside of the plastic, so they go on there a little bit easier. You don't have to use 15 fingers to make this thing fit. They'll be seated down inside of that saddle there. And then just a matter of tightening it up, making both sides fit. Crunch it down, don't crack the pipe obviously, but get it in there nice and tight. And a couple other things to mention. There are two types of saddles. You have one that has a compression fitting like this. If this is the style you have, then all you're going to need to do is push that tube in there, and it's going to seat just like every other fitting that we've showed you. But you may also find that there are styles like this. They have a threaded connector here, and then a nut on this side. And these kind, you push the tube through first. That then goes into your fitting here. It sits in there nice and tight, and then you twist this down. And you make sure it cannot be pulled out once you get it in there, okay? That's how those fit. This is a better option in my opinion, but some of them still do have these. And that's it. Once you get that drain saddle on there, it sits tight, and you can remove your guide, make sure it doesn't move, give it a good test. And at that point, now it's just a matter of hooking up all the tubes. Okay, now for the last component, if you will, of the RO system, and that's the storage tank, pressurized storage tank. The most common size you're going to get is a 4.4 gallon that holds 3.2 gallons of water. There are other sizes available. If you want a lot of water, you look for a 20 gallon tank, or if you don't think you're going to need this much, or maybe you're limited on space, you can get a smaller tank as well. And if you need help finding those, we're happy to help you with that. But this is the most common size. The way these function is that there is a bladder inside of the tank. And that bladder is what provides the pressure, the force, to push the water up and out of the tank and through the faucet when you need it. If it wasn't for that bladder in here, the water would just fill up the tank and it would just sit there. There'd be no reason for it to shoot up against gravity and out of your faucet, right? So you have to have this under pressure. You can check this if you need to, or if you want to. You don't necessarily need to, because they all come with the 5 to 7 PSI. That's the range you're gonna look for, 5 to 7 PSI of pressure. But if you want to check it, I just took off the cap here for the valve stem. This looks just like a bicycle tire. You can do the same thing and just check it with a pressure gauge. Maybe you need a low pressure gauge, or a very sensitive gauge to show you that level. But that's how you do it. If for some reason it's sitting at 12 PSI, well then you need to push the little, the pin in the middle there and let some air out. If it's too low, you can put some air in. But you only do that when the tank is empty. Don't do that with water in the tank. Okay, so that's how you can check. And if you need some troubleshooting down the road, that's a good spot to check as well. All right, so then the way you connect the tank is with a tank valve. This is going to go on top of the tank. You see that there's a threaded connector on the top, very much like the cold water supply line or the feed valve we did. Teflon tape around here if you want. They often come prepped with tape already. And then this valve just goes on top like that, twist it on until it's tight. You shouldn't have to over tighten it. You should have a good seal. But it'll be something that you check after you turn it on as well. You can't over tighten this and obviously crack the valve. And one thing to note about the valves, when the ball valve here, when the flipper is in parallel with the tubing, it's on. When it's turned 90 degrees, it's off. So it's best to just put all these on in the off position until you get everything hooked up, and then you can go back and turn all the knobs on and flip all the levers, okay? So that's how the tank goes on. If you're vertically challenged, if you don't have as much height, see, this is a pretty tall setup, right? It's probably 19 inches or so. If you don't have that amount of space underneath your counter, you can do this as well and just put it in at a side angle. They all come with one of these bases in the box. So you can go sideways, just make sure you have good access to the connector here, or vertical, depending on how you want to set it up in your situation. And that's it, that's the tank. Now it's time to start connecting all the tubes into the valves or the connectors or wherever they go, right? Everybody's system is going to be a little bit different, so I'm not going to show you all of those connections because your colors will be different, the locations will be different, but overwhelmingly, the way they all connect together is a compression fitting. This is a tank valve that I showed you a little bit ago. So I want to show you how these work, how to put the tube in it correctly so that it gets a good seal and doesn't leak, and also how to remove it because it's not an intuitive removal process. How to get the tube out in case you want to move it or you need to adjust something or whatever, right? So the way these work is, if you kind of look inside of these, you'll see there's a kind of a jaw setup that'll clamp down on the tube when it goes in there nice and secure. And so put some pressure on the back end of these, no matter where they are. And you'll take that tube and you'll start to push it in, and you'll feel it kind of stop a little bit, and then you can seat it again. It's almost like a double push. That means you've got a good seal, and you can't remove it, right? And you'll notice there's this collar, kind of the inside piece. That's the clamping part of that's what's clamping onto the tube. So you use 2 fingers, push that collar back towards the valve, and that'll release the jaws and allow you to remove the tube. Okay, so your feed line, you're going to need to plug that in. Feed line into your cold water supply line, into this. That'll go into here, right? You're going to have your feed line, your drain line going into your tank, or going into your saddle, your drain saddle. That's going to come out of the membrane or somewhere close to the membrane into your drain saddle. You'll have the one on top of the tank, and you have the one on the faucet. All of those will have a similar setup. And once you have those in place, well, then it's just a matter of turning on the water, right? Probably turn this valve on first, and then you'll turn your feed line on, so the flipper's in parallel with your tube, and the water will start flowing. You're going to hear it go through the system. You'll hear it work its way through the various filters. I don't know how many filters are on your system, but it'll go through those. And it's going to take a little bit of time before you see any water hit the tank and any water come out of the faucet. Open the faucet up anyway and just let it run for a little bit. Check all those connections. Anything that you worked on, go back and check. See if they're dripping, if there's water leaking out of there or whatever. Maybe you need to make that fitting a little bit tighter. Maybe it needs a little bit more Teflon tape or whatever. But just give a good look over of all those things. Once there's water coming out of the faucet, out of the RO faucet, well, then turn it off and let that tank fill up. Now, some systems may take a couple of hours to fully fill. That's how long it's going to take for that water to get through the system and get the tank up to the point where it's completely full. As I said, you can mitigate that. If you want to know how to do that, you can give us a call or drop us a line or whatever, and we'll help you, give you some examples or some things you can do to eliminate how much wastewater it takes and how fast those systems will fill up, because like I said, there's a way to trick that system into thinking that it's working harder than it really is. So that's one thing. Let the tank fill up, and once it's full and you don't hear the system working anymore, open the faucet up and let it drain all the way out. Just deplete that tank. You're going to want to rinse that tank at least once, if not twice, probably 2 times, before you get a good clear tasting or good clear water and it tastes good. You kind of got to rinse the membrane out, get that rubbery taste out of it. And you'll also find a lot of systems have a post filter, a carbon filter. It's the final stage. The water will go from the tank to the carbon filter, and then from that carbon filter back up to the faucet. That filter is there not to eliminate chlorine or take any more toxins out. It's simply to improve the taste. RO water is pretty acidic, and so it can sort of grab the flavors from the tank, from the stale, rubbery, and it often doesn't taste very good. That final filter will polish it up and make it palatable for you. The other way you can get rid of that taste is to put some alkaline minerals back in the system. That'll allow it to not be so aggressive in harvesting the flavors from the tank. If you can put it on the front side and get that alkaline water in the tank, that's good. Or even putting it afterwards will improve it as well. And those are other options that we can help you with. So once the tank's full and you've rinsed it once or twice, you should be good to go. Just keep an eye on those connections, make sure they're good to go and not dripping or anything. And then the final thing to consider is, I should have mentioned this when we did the tubing, but give yourself some slack. RO systems need maintenance, either every 6 months, every 12 months, depending on your system, where you're going to be removing the filters and putting new ones in. And make that as easy on yourself as possible. So give yourself some slack in the tubing if you can, so you can maybe take the whole system out of your sink and do it on the kitchen floor versus trying to get underneath there and remove those filters. If you don't have an RO system yet, I would suggest looking for one that has some quick connect filters. We have a threaded variety that just screws in like a light bulb. There are other ones that are very similar to that. Probably try to stay away from the big clunky filters that take a wrench and are full of water, and those are a little bit more of a pain, and they're kind of the old school method. So hopefully this has helped. Hopefully this gives you the confidence to put an RO system in for yourself and realize that you can have good quality filtered water and do a little bit of work and have some pleasure from that as well. If you have any other questions, or if we didn't touch on something that you need some help with, by all means let us know. Again, I'm Gabe with Vitev, and we'll talk with you soon.